I have the pleasure of introducing you to the co-founder of Dexory. And maybe you are better placed than me to tell me what Dexory does. What is the pain point your customers have, and how do you solve it?
Sure. So I'm happy to be here. I was actually in the same seat yesterday, so it's cool to be back, hopefully with some new faces, so I don't kind of bore you with the same story again. But I think in essence, we are pretty much a data intelligence platform for logistics is what we normally call ourselves. But behind that intelligence, we have pretty much two parts of our solution. One, just as we were introduced, there's an autonomous robot that has been purposely built to collect data and digitize warehouse spaces. And then on the top of that data, we build what we call an actual real-time digital twin of the particular warehouse. And there's a variety of different features on what you can actually do with the data after that. I mean, in the panel just before, we were talking about the insane amounts of data and information that obviously exist in some of the physical world. And from our perspective, like we're now well over, I think, almost 1.5 billion warehouse locations scanned. I mean, for people that don't work in warehouses, that's a lot of information about the living and breathing of these environments kind of day after day. And we've only been operating for just over 3 years now. So the pace at which you can collect this data is absolutely crazy. But going back to the actual pain point, so we have this information live. We created digital twins, which means that it gives our customers that are normally supply chain and kind of warehouse owners, capability to be able to track their space in real time, track their inventory, but also find different ways to make the whole operation much more efficient. But without that real-time data, that wouldn't be possible.
And what is it that has happened in the last 5 to 10 years that allows you to actually be able to deliver this? What has unlocked physical AI?
So I think as a co-founding team, it's three of us. I mean, yeah, we were talking earlier about being a solo founder. I think that would be pretty tough in the environment that we are in. But together with my other two co-founders, we've been in the space of robotics for probably almost a decade. So yeah, 10, 11 years ago, when we were telling people that we want to build robots, they were saying, you're absolutely crazy. Investors especially, that were like, okay, it's a very complicated business to look after. It's full stack, obviously it requires supply chain production lines, expensive hardware, and so on. But I would say, I mean, it's probably not the last 5 years, probably the last kind of 3 years that things have really changed. And now everyone is talking about robotics and physical AI, which we're very happy about, because finally the world's kind of caught up with us. But there's a few things that happened there. One is the cost of hardware has gone down significantly. Like a very simple example is LiDAR sensors that about a decade ago were, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000 to buy a piece. They're now a couple of $100, and we have about 7 or 8 LiDARs on our robots. So obviously, like the product that we are selling would have been ridiculously expensive to begin with, and the unit economics would have been crazy 10 years ago, whereas now that's kind of gone down a lot. And it's not just LiDARs, but anything else that you put on the robots. But then the second part of it is not that they're just obviously cheaper, but worse. They're actually much more powerful. Like all the sensors, the cameras, everything you have on it are extremely powerful, can capture a lot of information, but also that information can be processed on device. So you can actually digitize things just as the world moves. And obviously, like we're talking in this instance about what we do in warehouses, but it's very similar to like Waymo and autonomous cars wouldn't have been possible like a few years ago, at least not at scale and without Google losing a lot of money on it. And it's very similar like in other sectors where like you use some sort of autonomous system to digitize the world around.
And so now we have the ingredients to actually be able to deliver this commercially, so we can actually create the value. Is the world ready for adoption? How, what makes a customer ready for adoption? How are you judging who actually can even,
Yeah, I think it's, if you just talk about the technology itself, like physical AI, it doesn't really mean anything, right? So it's all about the applications and then what exactly would this do for me. But it's exactly the same thing for digital AI, not just physical, right? Everyone's playing around with the concept at a tech level, but not really like going through all the way to the business case and what exactly you're going to do with it. I think you kind of have to flip it around. Like even if the tech is ready, like unless you have those business applications, it's never going to stick. So what I always kind of tell people is go actually to the business application first, and then make sure that that tech kind of fits them rather than the other way around. So just because the tech's ready doesn't mean it will go big. So what happened in the meantime is, especially in our sector, after the pandemic, number one was like a big driver for it, all our customers realized that they have a very big issue with just not having enough visibility about what's happening in their spaces. And that visibility meant that they weren't very resilient during the pandemic. They couldn't just throw more people into the warehouse to be able to navigate the space and deal with the goods and everything else. So that triggered a need for data, triggered a need for being able to understand exactly what's happening across their estates. And then the question was, okay, how do we solve this? What technology do we bring in? So is the world ready for physical AI? I mean, yes, because the problems are there, but we just have to make sure that the way you kind of position that product or like pretty much kind of wrap it up does fit the business need. So yeah, you kind of have to bring the two together.
Understood. And so let's dream for a second here. What does a fully AI-powered warehouse or factory look like? Like, where are we moving towards?
Yeah, I think a lot of people watch YouTube videos and see this like fully automated warehouses where there's no person inside, kind of pallets magically appear at the door, driven by an autonomous truck, of course. Like stuff kind of gets picked by robots and then kind of come out on the other side. I mean, that future is very far away. And if you look at the warehousing market now, I mean, I know I'm geeking out about warehouses now. I promise I don't do that in my free time that much. But if you look at where they are right now, it's probably like 99.99% of them are very, very heavily manual environments. And that's the same for a lot of kind of industrial applications, factories, and so on. So the future that we're dreaming about, it's probably not really going to be achievable within the next 40, 50 years. That's also kind of driven by the fact that people kind of have leases on these buildings, and to be able to fully automate, you kind of have to purposely build a building around that automation and so on. So what's happening in the meantime is like you're seeing more and more applications at use case level, but you still have the site kind of run by people and pretty much decisions being made by people. And that's the space that we play in. So, and also, like, I know we talked at the beginning about the data capturing of physical AI, but once you have that data, is what you do with it and how you transform that into an insight and the insight into an action. And where we are seeing, and with some of the things that we are developing, is we're trying to cut that pretty much the time from data to action to as little as possible. So we're feeding our users immediately like, okay, we're seeing problems here, this is what you should do about it right now, let's kind of move that into an action. So what you're doing is you're trying to bring AI so that you level all the teams to the same level of like what we call intelligence, and then be able to operate much more efficiently. So rather than close the doors, just let the robots do things, you can actually do so much more with the same resources that you have in your current team by being able to orchestrate them exactly like where they need to be, what they need to do at the exact time.
Understood. Now, to pick up on something you said earlier, you said LiDAR, sensors, cameras. This is foreign speak to many builders of SaaS businesses, of traditional software businesses. So tell us a little bit about what it is like to actually be building a company that is a full stack company, a company where there's actually production and where you're dealing with like real world, like let's call it software wrapped in plastic and aluminum. How is that different from just a pure software company? How does that make your life harder or easier?
Yeah, I mean, obviously building a company is building a company. So you all have kind of the same pain points to begin with. But being full stack does require one to be a lot more, let's say, strategic and kind of wider thinking. Because what in a full stack business, what you always kind of have to try and balance is probably kind of three sides of the company. One is production, I mean, obviously. Second one is the deployment of that technology. So once you make the robots, somebody has to take them out in the field and put them with customers. And the third one is sales. So you always kind of have to keep an eye on making sure that the three operate as closely as possible. But versus like a SaaS company, for example, like if you have a lower quarter in sales, you can't just have your production team kind of twiddling their fingers and do nothing. Like you have to keep that production running regardless of how obviously like the commercials are doing. And also like if you don't have who to deploy that solution, then it means you're going to stack up a lot of robots and then your customers are going to be pissed off because it takes too long to deploy. So I think that's probably the hardest thing is how do you kind of balance the three areas. And the way that we do it, I mean, yeah, beginning of every year, obviously we look at where our numbers are, like what our ambitions are from a commercial perspective. And of course, like we build a plan on how many robots we want to build per week. Like what does that mean in terms of people, in terms of supply chain, like how much do you have to commit on that supply chain. And we do that for the year, but then we have very, very kind of close alignment every quarter to kind of understand, okay, are we still on that track? Do we need to kind of revisit anything? But also obviously not react in a panic way, because yes, if you had a bad month, it doesn't mean you're gonna like start cutting. Whereas in obviously SaaS businesses, obviously I'm saying from the outside, it's a little bit easier to navigate some of those things because you don't rely on so much kind of workforce and stock.
Understood. So what in your day-to-day just you expect that looks very different from what a SaaS founder has to deal with? Give us some things, especially that we've had also geopolitical fragmentation and volatility, and that actually means a supply chain is exposed to all of that, and you know you have to implement to different customers. Give us some things that just you don't expect SaaS founders deal with.
And it's a very good point around kind of the whole dynamic globally at the moment, because I think every single day I kind of wake up and look on Slack and something else has happened somewhere in the world. And I mean, just for context, like we have live customers all the way from Australia into Asia, into like North and South America, and of course all across Europe, so Middle East as well, which is the one I was going to go to. So we're quite spread out in terms of the customer base, but also going back to that supply chain point, our supply chain is global, so we kind of get things that go into the robots from all over the world. So you always have to kind of keep a pulse on what's happening to make sure that, you can kind of be a bit of ahead of the game. So a good example is like we still have robots somewhere in Dubai airport because we were meant to kind of deploy quite a few as the conflict started in the area. And our customers are a bit wary, our team is a bit wary. It's like, okay, when can we actually kind of get this back and running? Another example was when tariffs were kind of brought in by the US administration, kind of overnight we had to reconfigure how do we get goods into the US. We were stuck in customs for a couple of weeks at the beginning of this year because they changed one little rule when it comes to steel. And you have to kind of declare how much steel you have in your product. So there's all kinds of like complexities that you never even dream of that you wake up to and you're like, oh, okay, that's another interesting problem to adhere to. But it's, I think it's part of the fun. And from our perspective, again, as a founding team, like we always had this vision that we wanted to build something full stack. I think, we wouldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, and I mean, as an investor perspective, also, what we love about full stack business is that it's so differentiated and so difficult, right? So you can't just come up with 10 more competitors to Dexory tomorrow just because somebody spends 10x on tokens or because, Anthropic releases some new version of the model tomorrow. So it's difficult, but it's actually also what makes it very defensible in the future. So you actually started as a bootstrapped company. You actually pivoted. You started, and that's because of the advances, right? 10 years ago when you started, it was a very, very different kind of world out there. Why do you think some robotics companies fail at scale? Like, what actually happens, and what steps are you taking to ensure that that's not going to happen?
Yeah, there's probably quite a few things on it, and I mean maybe like to touch on that story because I think it might be relevant for a lot of people in the room. I mean we are 3 founders from Romania. We had moved to the UK to study, and then as part of our careers at one point we're like, okay, let's build a robotics business, as you do. I think when we started speaking to investors over 10 years ago, everyone was quite very, oh my God, this is going to be very hard to fund. So we can't give you money right now. So what we did is we did bootstrap quite a lot, and we went out and got local UK grants and then European Union grants. So I always kind of, when I talk about this to like friends in the US, everyone's like really surprised. Oh, you could just get money from the government? I mean, obviously for the right projects, there's a lot of support here. So again, going back to a lot of founders in the room here, it's not really an excuse. Like if you want to build a full stack business, that you need a lot of capital, and where am I going to get that to start? There's a lot of avenues to actually get that and get you going, especially in today's day and age. So we did kind of do a lot of that in the beginning until we had the first prototypes, and then we kind of started our venture journey. So I don't think necessarily from a failure perspective, money is the one thing that kind of makes full stack businesses fail, at least kind of definitely not anymore. But historically, what I've seen, and like, don't worry, I totally respect academia and kind of research and development, but a lot of robotics companies historically have been started from a research and development angle, rather than what I was saying earlier from a customer problem angle. So the technology was incredible, but it just never really found a problem to fit in, and they kind of tried to shoehorn it into those issues, especially on an industrial site. And of course, when you were there, you realize the real world is a lot more complicated than what you kind of thought in simulation, which is why some of the things failed. And then the other part is like you have to think about the scale. Like we knew from the beginning we're going to build a global business. So some of the things I was talking about in terms of the supply chain, in terms of production lines, were always built for what is it going to look like a year from now. And sometimes our investors might have thought like, oh my God, you guys are investing so much in R&D or investing so much in the production lines. It's like, yeah, we have to be a step ahead of where our customers are, because if that doesn't happen, then it's going to take us too long to serve them, and they're going to lose trust in what we're doing. So you have to always kind of think about how do you scale whatever you're building. And in full stack, that's even more complicated. And I think this is where, again, I see quite a few people failing in it, is because they realize, okay, I've got 5 units of something, but they are very expensive to make. They're very expensive to ship. So of course, when you have to do 5 to like even 50 or 500, that always kind of starts breaking.
Understood. Now, you mentioned that you're obviously global, and do you see a difference in the risk appetite to adopt a solution like yours around the globe amongst different customers? You're obviously at this point, you start in the UK, but you actually have more than half of your revenue in the US. You've just opened now in the US a big facility. Just how do you see, but how's Australia, how's Japan for you, how's Saudi? What do you see?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I think I was talking to quite a few people yesterday about the difference I see between US and Europe, for instance, in terms of adopting, well, at least our tech, which is in the US, you get your foot in the door very quickly, like people are super keen to start and do something, and then you have a little bit of a lag between that first kind of interaction to an expansion perspective. Whereas in Europe, it takes a long time to get in and build that trust, but then once you're in, it grows quite quickly. So it's a bit of a different type of model. I mean, both at the end of the day, within, let's say, 6 months, can end up on the same place. But I think from our perspective, obviously, we do appreciate the American way, because at least then if you're in, they can see the benefits of what you're doing a lot quicker, and then they can make kind of those decisions in a more strategic way. Whereas in Europe, even kind of getting you in takes a while until they actually see that first benefit, which is a little bit backwards than what we would want for new technology, especially, because obviously that kind of helps us grow as well as a business. But as I move kind of like further into Asia, and like Australia is such an interesting market, like we definitely see a lot of appetite for automation, tech, AI. It's very similar. I kind of say it's somewhere between the UK and the US, quite cliche in terms of mentality, but it's the same way in the way they're doing business. It's still very personal. Everyone knows everyone, like in the sector, so like that reputation point is very important there.
Okay, fantastic. Maybe to close off for our audience here, what do you think will be obvious in 10 years in physical AI that right now seems science fiction?
Yeah, I think we're going to be surrounded by a lot of automation in a lot of different areas. Like I'm not and I'm sorry for, like, I have a lot of colleagues in humanoid robots, and like we love each other, we help each other, but I don't think we're going to get to a point where we're going to have humanoid robots doing everything around us. However, in the next 5 years, it's going to be just a lot more automation in day-to-day stuff. So of course, autonomous cars are going to be all over, so the transport side is going to expand quite a lot. But I also feel like, yeah, in other parts of our day-to-day life, we're going to have a lot more purposely built hardware that's going to automate things that maybe we just don't want to do.
Well, thank you. Before a robotic MC kicks us out at the next year's conference, for now, we're going to hand back over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oana.